are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bill Baker, and I'm pleased to invite you to this Crisis Coach webinar series that is sponsored by the College of Continuing Studies at the University of Alabama. We want to congratulate the University of Alabama's football team, but keep in mind that University of Alabama is far more than just football, although football is really good there. Today we're going to be talking about the year in review. This is the 12th in the series of the Critical Decision Support series. Our presenter today is Firestorm's president, Jim Satterfield. We're delighted to have him with us today. Please become our friend, Firestorm Solutions, on Facebook. Twitter, we're Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Our attorneys remind us that this presentation is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and our work product must be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. Do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. Firestorm is delighted to have an ongoing relationship with the College of Continuing Studies at the wonderful University of Alabama. They're providing these free webinars for their alumni, their friends, and their family. You can go to firestorm.com and you can watch past webinars by clicking on the link there to watch the recorded webinars. And you can also register for future webinars in this series. And we look forward to having these continue in 2016. Our moderator today is our very good friend, Brenda Truelove. She's the program manager at the College of Continuing Studies. Brenda, over to you, please.
Well, good morning, Bill and Jim on the line there. Thank you so much for this opportunity again to share with you the great things that are going on the campus of the University of Alabama. We're very pleased to offer and be in partnership with Firestorm.com to help individuals learn about different business security risks, including one we're highlighting today, cyber force security risk and mitigation opportunity that we have coming up in January at the University of Alabama. We're ever more aware every day of the threats that are in the world and in our workplace related to cybersecurity. And so we decided that it would be good to offer a cyber force security course. And you know, the main question that's asked in this is, are you prepared? Is your business prepared? And we're delighted yesterday to participate in a virtual cyber exercise with Jim Satterfield and the Firestorm group, and it just raised more questions and shows us the need for business executives, IT professionals, and virtually everyone in an organization, no matter if it's a large company, a small company, a nonprofit, that they really need to understand their cyber arena, what's going on, and make sure that they understand the cyber context in which their organization operates, and be able to make sure that the executives are well informed about the potential risk, and also, you know, managing those risks and developing procedures within the context of your own business organization. So that's exactly what this course is designed to do. It's going to be on the campus of the University of Alabama, January 21st. And Firestorm's Jim Satterfield will be our lunch and keynote address. And the day's activities will also be led by David Augsmith. He's a member of the Intelligence and Security Academy in Washington, D.C., and he's also co-chairman of the FBI's Information Technology Study Group. So he's quite an accomplished individual, along with our planning committee on the university campus. Reg Hyde is a private consultant and executive director of the University Cyber Institute. He's a former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. He was high up, in other words. He's also had a career CIA Clandestine Service Operations Officer, and Dr. Mark Lanier is currently Associate Director of the University Cyber Institute. He does a lot of research on cyber, computer, and issues related to everyday workplace threats. So we've pulled together all the great resources. We'll let people know how to register for our event. It's showing on your screen. They can either call our 1-800 number, register online at training.ua.edu. You can view our website, cybersecurity. We have sponsor and exhibitor options available, and we really need at least about 20 or 25 more people to make the course a go, and we're going to be at a critical decision point of our own within the next week or so. So we're really looking forward to people signing up, and if you have any questions, my contact information is showing on the screen. We count the privilege at the university to be on the cutting edge of needs that people have, and so we appreciate your input. If you have any questions, give me a call. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the webinar today, Bill and Jim.
Thanks, Brenda. And just to reinforce, when we think about cyber risk and cyber breach and the security elements here, this is a business problem, not just an IT problem. The exercise that Brenda referred to yesterday was a virtual cyber breach exercise, and with the one we did last week and the one this week, we had 890 companies that sat through and took a look at this. This is a driving exposure for all of us, and I didn't remember that CIA background, and you pointed out earlier, and I thought it was interesting that today's call-in number was 007. So I think as we think about the exposures that we're seeing, and every day you can't turn on a news broadcast, pick up a paper, or look at a new announcement that's not another exposure there. And we'll talk about that today as we focus on the lessons learned. But this is an important opportunity, and it's a chance for you to get to sit down and meet with people that you wouldn't normally have an interaction with to gain those insights. So I think it's a great opportunity for everyone involved. I'm Jim Satterfield. I'm the president of Firestorm, and glad to be with you again today and with the University of Alabama as we talk about the year in review, what's happened this year in 2015, and as we get ready for 2016, what are the things that we can implement to make a difference. And we really talked about it's about critical decision support, and in a crisis, that's the type of information that you need and would make a difference, just as we were mentioning on cyber. So when you think about where do you start, and the key is, can you identify what your organization's next crisis is? We say we can, but the question is, can you? When we think about it, cyber exposure is clearly one that comes to the mind, and violence that we're seeing and terrorism. There's a great many of those areas out there, and so thinking about this and setting up a predictive intelligence network to be able to see what's coming forward and what do you need to do is certainly something that all of us need to focus on. So our first lesson that we're going to think about today are that crises are more common than you think. There was a study done in New York State by Dawson and Associates. I know Chip well, and they surveyed businesses there. And if you look, I was startled by that survey that they found that 64% of them had called 911 during the year. If you'd asked me how many businesses call 911 each year, I would have guessed it would have been in the single digits, and in fact in the low single digits. But 64% had to call 911. But if you read further down, it said, wait a minute, 2 of those companies had to call over 100 times each. Imagine if in your business you were having to call 911 twice a week. That would certainly be a significant exposure. So those are the threats that we're looking for. Now, when we found in this area, over half were medically related, and that seemed to make sense to me. That didn't startle me as much as the total volume of calls. 1 in 4 were for crime, 17% for fire, and 7 were for hazardous materials. And in community and company work environments, those also sound reasonable to me in that area. By the way, there were some for TV lineup, and but that's another webinar, and that people don't know what they're looking for and the right use of that. And we're really blessed in America that we have people that will run toward the crisis, run toward the gunshots, and that's an important difference. So this first lesson one is for everybody on the call. Crises are much more common than you think. The Red Cross states that there are over 70,000 disasters annually in America. The majority are fires, but more people die from drowning and in floods than any other exposure. So this is a very common occurrence. If you add to that the workplace accidents and injuries that come into it, the 2 million episodes of workplace violence annually in America, you see that we're living in an area where these crises are much more common. And they don't even necessarily have to strike you. And as we've talked about in other webinars, that it can be something that affects your supply chain. If you're in the manufacturing business or in any organization, there are vendors and suppliers that you depend on. Looking at their business continuity plans is clearly something that you need to look at. By the way, we found not only is supply chain failure the most common in a disaster or crisis, but it's also the most common in a cyber breach. So there's a great deal of carryover as we're looking here. So if you look at those questions listed down below in bold, who are your critical suppliers? Are they prepared? How do you know? And are you sure? What metrics do you use in doing that? And when was your company's last vulnerability threat assessment or your last BIA, business impact analysis? We're working with an organization now that's quite large and growing very rapidly, and we, in review, found out the last time they looked at the business impacts was over 8 years ago. So lesson one, these crises are common. We need to be focused on those now and let our organization know about it. Let's go to lesson number two. Most companies aren't ready. That picture, that's a pretty bad looking car. Hopefully if you're buying a new car from a used car dealer, that one won't be high on your list as it comes in. But look at the statistics around this. The same studies found, wait a minute, 85% of the companies had a plan and 90% had updated it. So Jim, why are you telling me people aren't prepared? But you need to kind of go under the covers and look at that information more. Most of these plans, when we review them, at best tell people what to do, but never how to do it. Take your plan and give it to one of your newest employees. If they're not, and then describe a scenario. If that plan doesn't tell them what to do and how to do it, then your plans are insufficient. That's an easy test that you can do and would help to carry you through that process. So any confusion in a crisis is deadly. And look at the statistics here. 30% of the companies had never held a drill or an exercise. That's one of the other common failures. If you don't test your plans, you don't know what your people, in fact, will do. That's 1 out of 3. A fourth of them had only held one drill, and it was fairly basic, like a fire drill. Think of all the exposures. Think about what happened in San Bernardino. What are you doing in those areas? Half had done a threat assessment. That meant half had never done a threat assessment, and only a little over a third had done a business impact assessment. So those plans are not, they're check-the-box plans. They're not really designed to help the company be prepared. You might want to consider working with an independent third party to test your plans. Firestorm would certainly be glad to do that. There are others in your areas, or maybe you might help another company in your area and they could help you. But testing your plans will be very critical. You're going to find out that your companies are not ready. As we move on to think about lesson number 3, and I had already mentioned some of the crime statistics. If you look at these, and Birmingham, Alabama made the list. Brenda, I'm not sure that's a list you wanted to be on, but if you look at the violent crime rate there, yeah. Brenda, you're not out there committing all that crime, are you?
Well, I can tell you a lot about it, though. It is, unfortunately, a well-known fact in downtown Birmingham, Alabama.
So when you think about this, this is a crime rate that is sweeping across the country. And if we think about the events that just happened in San Bernardino, and the level of fear in America today is certainly a major change. So this third lesson is violence is present and growing. I shared already this statistic about OSHA saying there are over 2 million episodes of workplace violence annually in America. We're seeing domestic violence moving into the workplace. We're seeing behaviors of concern. And so you need a program within your company to identify those behaviors before they rise to the level that someone's bringing a gun to work. You might want to check the Firestorm website out in February. we're going to be running an active shooter virtual exercise, just like we did this month with the cyber breach. This one will be geared toward helping companies experience what it's like, seeing what those behaviors of concerns are as it escalates into violence, and following the standard protocols of response: lockdown, lockout, shelter in place, and evacuate, and then dealing with the consequence management associated with it. So that'll be an opportunity for you to get your management team around the table again, your crisis team, and experience what it's like to make a decision in an active shooter environment. By the way, there'll be two different sessions, one geared toward schools and one geared toward businesses. So while you might want to do this with your company, you might recommend to your children's schools or those in your area that this will be a great opportunity. We had 890 companies that went through the cyber breach virtual exercise. I anticipate we may have that many for schools alone, and then again a matching number for businesses. The fear around homegrown terrorism remains a top concern. One person with ill intent can certainly strike fear into the minds and hearts of our parents and our students and our teachers as we look through this. Fourth, as we think about it, civil risk is alive and well, and seeing that police van burn and the unrest that we've seen around the country, whether it was Ferguson, Baltimore, Chicago, Black Lives Matter movements, calls to action around the country, and other groups of civil unrest. We've had two university presidents forced to resign this year in response to racism, and so this civil unrest is building. Now, we looked at this a couple of years ago with the Occupy Wall Street movements that were on, and those were, in fact, calm compared to what we're seeing now in these directions. We were working with another organization who had demonstrators just arrive in their location to protest and penetrated the lobby of the building that they had occupied. No city is immune to this, and it is the type of thing that can happen spontaneously. And so do you have a plan? And this is an area that we thought of years ago when we thought about the events that occurred in LA and other cities as those things had come together. But having a plan for civil unrest, that's certainly been a lesson that's been brought forward this year, and a way for you to think about updating your plans and looking into those particular areas. I'll also tell you again, this is an opportunity for predictive intelligence, monitoring what's being said in the neighborhood around your offices will certainly give you a good insight. We're working with an organization right now and looking at their 700 locations, doing a geofence around their business locations within a mile radius to be able to identify events as they're emerging so that they can handle and respond to them appropriately. Fifth, your employees' actions can destroy your brand. I think when we look at the news stories about Jared and the Subway franchise system and the impact that that's had, but that could have been any employee. We recently, in working with a company, had asked them how long it took them to build their brand and their company, and they had said 40 years. They've been in business for 40 years and built a very large brand and recognition on it. And in today's world, that could be destroyed in 140 characters. So one tweet going out with having the impact, addressing the types of issues here, could certainly turn and change that. We talked about Subway, Volkswagen, and your perception there, and the manipulation and fraud that was generated, in my opinion, by those engineers who rigged the admissions controls. That's defining, in fact, who they are, and the perception in the market and the value of the cars has gone down. It's hurt their dealer network as well as everyone else involved in that pipeline. So when we find that employees will make decisions that management would never suspect that they would do, and we've heard many times, well, no one would ever do, insert whatever it is that you're concerned about here, but in fact, yeah, they would, and they've done so, and they've also talked about it on social media. So you can be defined by those actions for years to come. Last year, they introduced the new ISO standard for quality, and it included risk added into that. So you can't think about quality without risk. Those go hand in hand in this perception. And so you need to take a look at that. And if you haven't conducted a business crisis risk audit, where are the risks that are embedded and inherent in our business? That's probably something that would be extremely worthwhile and would make a difference as you focus on those issues. As we think on to 6, and that's where we started today, with Brenda pointing out what the University of Alabama is doing about cyber breach in their upcoming conference. And cyber risk impacts everyone. There have been over 1 trillion people in America who've already had their identity stolen. Well, wait a minute, Jim, there's only a little over 300 billion here. Well, guess what? Most of us have had our identity stolen multiple times in that cycle. But if you haven't seen Ted Koppel's new book, I would recommend that you look at it. It's entitled Lights Out. And Ted did a good job of analyzing the threat to the national grid that's posed by cyber breach. And then he identifies several nation states as particular targets or groups that are attacking us in that area, and highlights a variety of things in his books. If you have not read this one, I would strongly encourage you to do so. It may change your perceptions greatly. And he points out that the Internet of Things, as we have put more things available to be controlled over the Internet, has increased our exposure exponentially. And what we want to be able to do is to be prepared to deal with that, because if you bring this grid down, it could be weeks or months before you're able to operate. If we take electricity away from your business, you're going to move back in time 150 years. Think about what those impacts are. What are the areas that you're going to focus on? So this lesson is that cyber risk impacts everyone. Even if you don't know it, it will be there. This breach is a business problem, not an IT problem. Yeah, we need to have our IT teams working. We need to have our Chief Information Security Officer, our information security people within our company, but they have to stop every attack. When we look at this distributed denial of service and where those surges come in, we were working with a company and they had millions of attacks just in a short few hours that were happening on their company as a result of that. The bad guys only have to be right once. The good guys, you, have to stop them 100% of the time, and it's not going to work. So the information is stolen. The FBI states that there are 2 kinds of companies, those that know that they've been breached and those that have been breached and don't know it yet. So this is a significant threat, and it's one that you need to be focused on and looking at your business and to see what's there. Looking at what is your critical information that would be available. If you look at the change in our companies today, 80% of your assets are involved in the information area. Used to be 80% of our assets were physical. Today, they're more in this information and intelligence areas, these virtual modes. So if you think about it, Homeland Security, that our biggest threat is a cyber Pearl Harbor. And as we consider that, you need to identify what those vulnerabilities are and what your response plans within your company. And then in this particular threat around electricity is significant. Interestingly, as a side note, the rural utilities are in actually better shape than the ones that are in the urban areas because they haven't connected to the grid. They have more independence and to be able to operate. But this is a planning strategy that needs to be held with the highest level within your company. So we've thought about 7 of the 10. What's number 8? Insurance remains a part of the solution. We've seen in the past where, as we all being business continuity professionals or managers in organizations that are there, that insurance plays a role, a risk transfer. And what insurance is designed to do is to try to make you whole after an event occurs. Can't stop it from occurring, although there are some risk management services there. But we're seeing now that this is becoming an ever-increasing part of planning and preparing for crises. So as we go into this lesson, it's a key part. New coverages like cyber breach response, crisis management, sexual molestation, deadly weapons, brand and reputation coverages. So we're going along past your commercial general liability policies. We're going past the property policies in case you had a fire at your location or the business interruption ones. And a lot of those policies don't cover the types of risk and exposures that we're seeing and emerging. This is an area that you need to sit down and meet with whoever is addressing the insurance needs within your organization. It could be a risk management department if you're big. If you're a smaller company, it could even be through purchasing or legal as you look at that. But that has to interplay because remember, the goal of insurance is trying to make you whole. Now, when we talked about cyber, and I know that that's an area that rests with all of us, it's one of the few risks that can bring your entire company down. You might have a warehouse that would burn, or a location, or there could be a flood, or there could be disruption. It would have an impact on your business, but in all likelihood, your company would survive. A cyber breach is the type of a threat that many companies will not be able to recover nor respond to. So make sure you know what the triggers are that would be activated for your insurance. If you don't let them know as you see events start to development, that could even be dealing with sexual harassment in your workplace, or violence, or other types of threats that are occurring there. Those are exposures that you want to make sure if you don't notify the carrier soon enough, it could void the carrier coverage that you've been paying all those premiums for to make it happen. And in particular, if you're going to think about cyber, you want to analyze what your exposures are to decide what role insurance will play. It's now available at a level that's appropriate for big companies and small companies in analyzing those risks. So if you haven't done it, that's an area that you might want to consider. If you need some help, we would be glad to help you in that area. We're getting close to the end of the top 10. Wait a minute, crises are predictable. Now, we can't tell you that somebody's going to do something or something bad is going to happen at a particular point in time, but we can see those things that are starting to emerge. And if you haven't developed a predictive intelligence network, then you're missing an exposure, because one of the things that one of the common failures is the failure to identify and monitor, here's that key word, monitor all threats and risks that are exposed to your business. Now look at that posting that came up last month at Keene University. It's a real post from a real person. I will kill every black male and female at Keene University. In today's world, you have to take that threat seriously. And the statistics are that when someone knows they talk, and where do people talk today? It's on social media. And I think the next slide gives those statistics, but let me share them with you now. If someone has ill intent, 80% of the time, someone else knows. 67% of the time, 2/3 of the time, 2 or more people know, and when people know, they talk, and they talk on social media. If you've thought about the risk and the vulnerabilities and threats that you've done and created with your vulnerability threat analysis, or your all hazards approach, or your impact hazard matrix, you need to sit down on each one of those and say, what are the what do we monitor? What are the triggers? What's a derivative that we can monitor with that exposure to see that it's happening? The other thing that's happening is all these symbols that we're putting into emails and communicating with and talking. Obviously, that means shoot a cop that you see there on the screen. Harry Ruland, who is one of the other founders of Firestorm, talks about we've moved back in time to cave dwellers because we're now drawing on the walls of our caves, and we're using symbols to deliver those messages. So as you think about it, it's not only looking at the words that are out there, it's looking at the things that can be said and shared in each of those areas. So what do we mean when we say crises are predictable? How do you design a predictive intelligence network? Well, your geographic location is a factor in many natural disasters. We had the tornadoes a number of years ago that came right through Alabama and disrupted many businesses there and had those areas. If you're coastal, you could have hurricanes, or if you're seeing heavy storms come across the country. We've had the wildfires that happen in the West. Right now, I think Utah is having a storm with 8 inches of snow, and they only had 6 inches all of last year. So when you think about that, your geographic location determines, and I think we probably as a group do a better job with monitoring the weather than any other exposure. but what about some of the human risk? What are those behaviors of concern that provide those warning signs before they occur? If you need to establish a program where you focus on behaviors of risk and threats before they arise, letting your employees recognize it, that you've got a formal intervention program. If you haven't updated your workplace violence program in a number of years, those are the opportunities before we're dealing with the active shooter in the other regions. Looking at and monitoring, as I described earlier, the social media, and it's not what's posted on your website. It's great that you've got a Facebook for your company or LinkedIn. It's what others are saying in the public domain. We're not going to hack into somebody's password-protected account to see it, but as you're seeing those activities start to occur on social media, wouldn't you, and if that was happening around your location, wouldn't you want to know that? If that was dealing with your employees with domestic violence or threats against their supervisor. We've shared in some of the other webinars, we put up a geofence around a Fortune 10 distribution center. And in looking at the traffic in and out of that, we found an employee that made 80 postings in one 8-hour shift. That begs the question, does this person have enough to do? But in the dialogue, as he was posting on a blog and sending messages to others and it being shared, he talked about how he was having a problem with his supervisor. And it later evolved that that problem was racial. And then finally he said, look, there's only one way to resolve this, and that's with a gun. I'm bringing a gun to work tomorrow. Now, would you like to know that today, or would you like to know it tomorrow when that man shows up at the office with a gun looking for that supervisor? So if you haven't built this idea of a predictive intelligence network within your system, you're not aligning your organization to standards and best practices. So as you think about that, how do you monitor your identified risk? And if you've got a team that's been working and supporting with you, that's a great question to ask them to help you think of on each and every one of those. Okay, we've gone through 9. There's only one left. If we think about the top 10 lessons for the year, what is it? It's the rate of change. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I remember Dick Tracy from the comics and having that great two-way wrist TV where you could show a picture and send a picture and communicate back and forth. And while that was far-fetched in the 50s, it's now reality with the Apple phones and all the other devices that are out there. Everything that we thought of with Dick Tracy is happening, but it's continuing to happen, and it's happening faster than it's happened before. So this rate of change is the biggest risk factor that you can associate. Think about businesses that don't exist anymore, that used to be dominating the market space. Blockbuster comes immediately to my mind, and you can go through a long list of others that just are no longer there. Think about we all used to run out and buy the devices that would help us figure out the GPS systems. Now that's on every phone in the country. So the world changes, and if you don't build that into your plan and your plans don't adjust, then you're going to find that you're worrying about the wrong things. And so planning in this is a business crisis risk, not a business crisis risk, as it says down at the bottom of this slide. It's something for you to think about. I also want you to remember that as we think about a business, a crisis is not business as usual. It's business as unusual. So these disruptions, this rate of change changes what you're doing. And so in many cases, you're dealing with millennials at work, you're dealing with other exposures that you never thought of, and those are the areas, your dependency on third parties. We talked about cyber breach in the upcoming conference at the University of Alabama, but another client had bought flash drives, and they were, before they gave them out to their employees, and they bought them at a big box store. And they checked them. Every single one of them had malware previously installed on it, and they came sealed in the package from the store. So this rate of change of understanding where the threats and exposures are and adjusting what you do now becomes an urgency that we need to see. As we have moved everything to the cloud, as we have everything now, it becomes the internet or the virtualization of devices. It makes a rate of change that's overwhelming. As we move toward the idea of driverless cars, and we think about what's coming forward in that standpoint, that's going to revolutionize how things are delivered, and empowering the elderly suddenly to be able to go to the grocery store and the doctor by having a car that would direct that. If you're not thinking about what's changing, everything will be obsolete in our lifetime. Think about what's not there today that was there when you went to high school, when you went to college, and what's moving forward. So stopping and identifying what those business crisis risk indicators are in your business. When we think about those elements, it becomes absolutely critical. So those are the top 10 for 2015. And I think that each one of those teach us a lesson as we make our plans for next year. Now, your plans are going to be tested next year, I will guarantee you. The question is, do you want to test them in a crisis or before? We strongly recommend that you test your plans now and follow this predict, plan, perform approach and methodology. Predict what the vulnerabilities and threats are. What are their impacts? How are you going to monitor them? What are the triggers that are going to cause your plans to be activated? Put those plans in place around crisis, around cyber, around communicable illness, around workplace violence, around business continuity. All of them have to be there. And then underperform, you got to train your people. The majority of employees don't know what they're supposed to do in a disaster or crisis, and the majority don't have a disaster plan at home. Do you have the emergency supplies that you need? Have you tested your plans and conducted those exercises? So as you ask yourselves those predict, plan, perform questions, it will help you to be prepared. I want you to test your plan before there's a crisis. It's going to make a difference in the outcome for your people. So what's next? Do you want to know what's going to happen tomorrow, and can you afford not to? If you don't spend some time on the cyber breach areas, if you don't spend some time thinking about creating predictive intelligence, it'll make a difference. Sorry you missed the cyber exercise yesterday. We'll probably schedule another coming up in 2016. There is the conference at the University of Alabama in January. I'll bring that slide up in just a moment so you can jot that down. But this is an area that you need to become involved in. You want to align your plans to standards and best practices, design that intelligence network that we've been talking about. Here's another trend, and it's part of the rate of change slide. Used to be we put our plans into binders, and they would gather dust on the shelf. Then we put them into systems, and they were available on our intranet or on our individual computer drives within companies. But if there's a power outage, if there's a disruption in a fire, people aren't going to be looking for it there. They're not going to carry a binder out of the building, but they are going to carry their smartphone. So making sure that your plans are on those smartphones and devices, and they can be customized. Maybe all employees have the emergency plans. Your individual departmental plans are only on those departments. Your crisis management plan is only there for your senior executive. But putting your plan on your smartphone, on that device, will make the biggest difference in the world, because that phone works even if the internet's down, even if the electricity is out. As long as it's on that phone, they can access it and they get a better response. If you haven't done anything else, you need to schedule some training for your team. Firestorm would love to work with you in our Crisis Coach program. If you want to download a brief from today's exercise, from today's webinar, you can, whether it's the one before where we talked about the first crisis, or today talking about the lessons learned. We're certainly glad to share that. Go to firestorm.com briefs. So Brenda, I'm excited about the cybersecurity and risk mitigation, the event that you're holding in January on the 21st. When you think about the lessons today of that particular event, anything else that you want to share with us, Brenda?
Well, just want to highlight the timeliness of it, of what's going on in our world, and that January is always a good month to take stock of where you are in your company and your personal life, and so it's a good start for 2016. And Jim, just let me take this moment to thank you and Firestorm for the great partnership and assistance that you've been to the University of Alabama, and we really appreciate your help, and really hope that everyone has a great holiday season coming up. And of course, we're looking forward to January the 11th, 2016.
Well, listen, I think you'll be there, and it'll be exciting. I'm a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech, but I have to say roll tide here as we go forward on it, and the playoff system that's going. Unfortunately, Tech's not a part of that this year. Hopefully that trend would change somewhere in the future. It looks like Alabama's always right around there in that hunt, so we got our fingers crossed. Things are predictable. I'm sorry, Brenda, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to everyone again, and have a great day.
Things are predictable. University of Alabama is going to have a competitive football team and be in the hunt every year. Cyber breach is a risk and an exposure. If you haven't sat down and thought about the business impacts, and this is an opportunity if you want to go to the University of Alabama, invest a day, and I think you'll find that it will be extremely helpful for you to learn what's going on and what's happening in the market. If you've got questions, you can go to firestorm.com. The brief from today's webinar would be there, a recording link to today's webinar if you want to share that with others within your organization. Those are available at no charge. If you've got questions, you can scoot us an email at webinars@firestorm.com or give us a call at 800-321-2219. We wish you a happy holiday, and this is a time of family and faith and new directions for all of us as we think about what's going on and what can possibly happen. Crises are predictable. The trends are there. The impacts can be severe. Predict, plan, perform. The difference between a disaster and a disruption is your plan. And I think this is a time to also thank you for all that you're doing within your company and what you've done and the jobs and help that you provide people there. It's an important aspect for all of you. So thank you again. Until we talk next year in the series, we look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully I'll get to see some of you at the University of Alabama on January the 21st for that cyber conference. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again. Thanks, Brenda. And I'll have to say it, roll tide. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.